So this happened a few months ago. I'm a sophomore in college and was traveling down to my hometown over break. I was having some relationship issues with my stepmom, so I didn't want to stay at my dad's house that night I arrived at my hometown. I phoned a friend of mine from high school to see if I could stay at his place. I knew from social media that he was still in town, and I've stayed at his place before, so I knew that there would be a place for me to stay. My friend, let's call him Z, seemed to be a pretty normal dude. We weren't best friends or anything, but he and I got pretty close by the time we graduated. We occasionally text or hung out if I was in town, and catch up, reminisce on the times we spent in the orchestra or in English class. When I called, he seemed extremely enthusiastic. Z's a normally upbeat guy, but this time it seemed like he was getting a brand new car. I didn't think about it at the time, and he said I could sleep in the guest room, so I headed over. When I got to his house, he was just as excited as he was on the phone. He was bringing up stuff to do, like getting high, and watching weird movies or playing video games. Z's parents weren't home, so he really wanted the opportunity to smoke. I was pretty tired from the drive, but since we rarely saw each other, I thought a little bit of bonding couldn't hurt. We played Smash Bros, smoked some weed, and just chatted for a few hours. It was longer than I wanted, but I was having fun, so whatever. By the time it was getting late, around 2 a.m., he started asking me some pretty weird questions. Questions like if I ever wondered what it's like to kill someone, or if I thought anyone would miss me if I was gone. This along with some pretty normal questions, like if I've ever had a boyfriend, or how my parents are doing, or if I'm making any friends at school, and this gave me a weird feeling. I was confused in the moment, but it didn't hit me until after that Z could be assessing me for something bad. The weirdness of it all made me want to go to bed. We stopped the game and both went into the basement where his room and the guest room was located. We say goodnight, I go in my room and get ready for bed. I'm having trouble sleeping, just insomnia that I've had for a while, so I stay awake for another hour until I hear some movement from outside my room. The walls were pretty thin, so I could hear footsteps walking past my door and up the stairs to the main floor, then back down quickly after. What struck me as odd was that I didn't hear the basement door open, which creaks when it does. The light didn't turn on, so I was confused what Z was doing. I heard him go back into his room, but I had this odd feeling. Just ever since I saw him last night, he seemed a lot different than he's ever been. I decided to look him up on social media and Google to see anything out of the ordinary. Everything seemed normal until I found his Tumblr, which linked to an inactive Twitter account that I found on my Twitter contact list. His Tumblr was, well, disturbing. There were graphic drawings of mutilated bodies of humans and animals, links to suspicious looking websites that I didn't dare click on, text posts, and stories about murdering, cannibalism, necrophilia, and torture. There were photos of guns, knives, axes, which after looking at closely, were definitely taken from his bedroom. The last post, around a week prior, which was a post from his account saying he wished he could find someone easy to kill, like a homeless person. I was immediately filled with dread. I knew he was going to do something. He must have gone upstairs to lock the door. I packed my things, luckily I packed lightly, and opened the small window at the top of the bedroom wall. I started desperately climbing through, and as I was pulling my legs through, he opened the door. It was dark, but the streetlights illuminated enough for me to see he was carrying something long and skinny, so probably a knife. He didn't say anything. I didn't say anything. I just turned around, hopped in my car, and drove off as fast as I could to my dad's house. I immediately blocked him everywhere and reported his Tumblr account, not before telling the police. They said they couldn't do anything, as the guns are registered under his dad's name, and he hasn't actually done anything yet. Nevertheless, I told all my other high school friends not to hang out with Z. Ever since then, I've been creeped out whenever I meet new people. Just realizing that someone I knew so well could underneath be a person that wanted to hurt me so bad, who could kill me. I don't know what you're doing now, Z. I'm not sure I want to know. I hope you're getting help. Anyways, let's not meet again. I posted this as a reply to another creepy encounters post, but figured I would also post it as a standalone because there were some really interested responses to that one. I had an experience maybe a decade ago that had me shook for years. I was on my way to work and stopped to get gas. I worked at night and it was maybe 9 or 10 p.m. I walked into the gas station convenience store, and as I walked past the man, I had the most horrific sense of dread. As soon as I felt the fear-induced adrenaline rush began, he had turned and looked at me, and I swear, it was like time slowed down. He only looked straight at my face for a moment, never stopped turning his head, but I was so terrified that I turned and left immediately. I was so scared that I raced off and told everyone at work about this dude. When I try to think back on what it was about him that terrified me, I have no idea. I didn't recognize him. He was a totally normal looking dude. Brown hair, brown eyes, white dude in jeans and a white t-shirt, but I was certain he was gonna kill me in that instant. No idea why this happened, and I've read tons of shit online trying to figure it out. It's never happened again to me. So this happened around 2017 or 2018. I was in 8th grade and quite tall for my age, 5'9". A house was for sale in the neighborhood, and it filled pretty quickly since I lived next door to a school. Every day for a week, I saw someone stand in front of the house, and I assumed it was just the new neighbor. But one day I got off the bus and started walking down the street. It was winter in Canada, and they were like tents that you put on your car so it doesn't get snow on it, and obviously you can't see behind it. So when I was walking next to the one of the new neighbor, he was hidden behind it, and he just grabbed me by the arm and started trying to pull me inside. On quick reflexes, I hit him in the face with my keys, and then he let go of me. I got into my house as quickly as possible and called the police. He never got caught, and the police patrolled my neighborhood for a week after that. Also, he wasn't even the new neighbor. So let's not meet again. Okay, so this happened about 15 years ago, but to this day, I could not live on the ground floor of a building. When I was 15, I was staying home at my mom's house for the weekend. My parents are divorced, so it was just me and her. It was about 12:30 in the morning, and I was just chilling in the living room watching TV while my mom was asleep. The living room had 2 windows that faced the front yard, and it often left the curtains open as the house sat pretty far back on the road. My mom's house was not in the best part of the town, but I always felt relatively safe there. While I was watching TV in my pajamas, I saw movement out of the corner of my eye from the window that was closest to me. It was about 4 feet away. I turned and looked out the window. There, a man's face staring right back at me, smiling with the most hideous grin I had ever seen. I was frozen, and for about 20 seconds just sitting there with my eyes locked on his. Suddenly, my panic set in, and I leaped off the sofa and tried to run to my mom. I slammed my leg right above my knee into the wooden coffee table and fell on the ground. My leg felt like jelly. I scrambled up and shouted for my mom. My mom came running in, half asleep, wondering what was wrong. I started stammering that someone was at the window watching me. Just as my mom started to realize what I was saying, we both heard someone attempting to open the front door. Me and my mom both stood still, thanking God that the door was double locked. But then when it stopped, my mother looked horribly grave and just whispered, "The back door." She turned and bolted through the house, scrambling to turn the deadbolt on the back door in the kitchen, and then backed away. She ran to her room and pulled a baseball bat from beneath her bed that I always knew she kept because she was a woman living alone. Frantically, she asked me to call the police, which I did. I was whispering to the operator that someone was trying to get into my house. We then saw a shadow approaching the back door quickly and trying desperately to open the door, kicking and grunting while they tried to get in. My mother shouted, "I have a bat and I'll fucking kill you if you try to get into this house. We've called the police and they're on their way." The person on the other side stopped and was still for about 30 seconds before turning and running away. My mom and I stood in the middle of the kitchen for the 20 minutes it took the police to get to us. The whole time, my mother had the bat raised and ready to strike. When the police finally came, they looked around the house. They found that the flowers outside the window were trampled on, and there were several cigarette butts on the ground outside the window where I had initially saw the man. No one in my house smokes, and the police assumed that he had been there for a while. They didn't find him and took my description, but we never heard anything else about it. My mom moved away from that house a year later, even though we never had another incident. I now live in another country with my husband, who wonders why I have no desire to own a house and love living in high-rise apartments. I also pay for state-of-the-art security and have a baseball bat in my closet, just like my mom. I have no idea what would have happened if my mother hadn't realized the back door was unlocked and hadn't beaten the man to it, or for some reason my mother wasn't there that night, as she often worked late. I don't know if the man thought he could overpower the two women alone, or if he was just trying to scare us. Whatever that man had attended, I pray he didn't find someone else who forgot to lock the back door. Allow me to set the stage for this. I was 19 at the time this took place. I was a Marine, and I was on my first deployment to Afghanistan. Not too far from my platoon's patrol base was a structure that looked like a castle. Though interpreted conversations with locals, we were able to determine that we believed it was built for Alexander the Great. Whether that's true or not, I'll never know, but let me tell you, this place looked ancient. So being in the Marines, we did the only thing we thought was prudent at the time. We went on a patrol with the intelligence of setting up an OP inside the structure. We took the Afghan border police with us. When we got close to the structure and our Afghans figured out what we were up to, they refused to go any further. Before they left, they kept on repeating the same word over and over. Don't ask me what it was. It was over a decade ago, and there's no way I can remember it. But what I do know now was that they were trying to warn us of evil spirits. We went in anyway, without our Afghans, with the intent of staying there overnight. This place was basically an ancient fort with mud and clay brick walls on all four sides, with a building in the middle. So we set up security, made sure we had comm checks with our patrol base, and they had an updated position report on us so they knew where we were in case we got into trouble. Darkness fell. Not too long after, I went to take my turn on the wall with my friend to watch out for anyone that might be trying to sneak up on us and any other Taliban-related shenanigans. Not even 20 minutes into our shift, weird shit started going down. The entire time I was at the wall, I felt watched from all sides. I turned to see a figure walking along the wall, not far from where I was sitting. I saw it walking, but it was a robed figure that looked like it was almost floating. I turned to my friend to see if he saw it too, and he said he did, but when he got his night vision back on, the figure was gone. We didn't see anything else for the rest of our shift. We were uneasy and finished and went to rest, where I finally ended up dozing off at some point. I don't know what happened next, but I awoke to a completely black figure literally squatting on my chest. When I went to yell for help, nothing came out, and it felt like I had a hand over my mouth. I reached for my knife and felt like something was pinning my arm to the ground. I tried to squirm free but couldn't move, so I bit down as hard as I could on what felt like a hand on my mouth. At this point, whatever weight was on me instantly disappeared and I could move and talk again. I was freaking out, and my brothers who were around saw me. My training kicked in, and I was trying my best to keep quiet and not pass out because I was hyperventilating. My squad mates calmed me down, and after telling them what happened, they all admitted to having creeps and feeling being watched the whole time they were there. None of us could sleep, and we all basically sat back to back for the rest of the night when we weren't on watch. We were pretty freaked out, so every noise or rustle of the wind made it even worse in the total silence of an ancient fort in that ancient desert. If you haven't experienced the silence of an open desert in a part of the world that there's absolutely zero light and zero noise pollution, then I suppose it would be hard to appreciate any noise in a place in the middle of the night in total darkness when you're already alert to sounds of the enemy, and now even more alert from something you can't understand. It's just about the scariest thing that anyone could ever experience. I will never experience that kind of fear again in my life, ever. To finish quickly, As soon as the sun came up, we left. Everyone was scared shitless, and none of us spoke about it again to each other. We never went back to that area again, and I still suffer from nightmares and sleep paralysis because of my personal experience that night. The scariest part of this whole thing is, I know it's probably just in my head. That's my, I guess, ghost story. If you stuck it out, thank you. I hope you enjoyed. First, we will need context. My old house was pretty pumped up on security. We had a finger ID, passcodes on the door, cameras everywhere, an automatic security system that would call the police or play a fake "the cops have been called" message. The story happened a few years back. My dad noticed a weird looking man, pretty covered up, lurking on the street just outside of our house. We thought nothing of it since sometimes you get an occasional drunk or high person wandering around your neighborhood. But this man started to inch up closer to our home, first being on the opposite side of the street, then before we knew it, being basically on our property. We just sort of watched him to see what he would do. I'm pretty sure we got bored and walked away, and just forgot. Then we started hearing strange noises coming from the downstairs, where our front door was. We decided to switch on the camera, and sure enough, this guy is banging on our door trying to get in, and then he looks through the window. He gave up, but then started to go around the side. There was a set of stairs that led into an upper area where we were. He starts to head upstairs, which sent my dad to go to the side of the house that the man was on with a knife and scream at him. The guy runs and we don't see him again. That's the end, right? Wrong. The guy comes back later. I guess he saw the car was gone from the driveway. My dad had gone to get something, leaving me and my mom. We didn't want to confront the guy, so we had the idea of playing the fake cop alert that could be heard outside. So we played it, and as soon as the guy heard it, he ran. Never saw him again, and never want to. What makes this story creepier is on the news later, it showed a guy that had been lurking around houses and actually killed people, had just been arrested. It was the same man who was at our house. I'm going to share something that happened to me last night. So for a bit of background, I'm a 13-year-old male in the UK, and I have a Doberman that I normally take out in the back garden so she can do her business before bed. But this time was a lot different. I had opened the back door and she darted off into darkness, so nothing out of the ordinary, but when I called her back, she didn't show. I sat there for about 15 minutes waiting when I see something move in the distance. I brush it off, and that's when my dog just walks into the flat. When I walked in and shut the door, my blood ran cold as I heard the door handle jiggle. It had to be a person. It wasn't windy or anything. I flung myself against the door, and my dog started growling with her back hair standing straight up, breathing heavily. It was terrifying. I took off my slippers and held them in my hand so I wouldn't make a noise as I walked away from the door and practically flung myself up the stairs. I must have fell asleep because later that night I woke up to the sound of faint cackles from outside, and I just laid there horrified. To whoever was on the outside of that door, let's never meet again. For a short period of my life, I lived in a car. Don't worry, my life is good now. When you live in a car, you pick up systems. Ways to keep your car clean, places to shower for cheap, and most importantly, where to sleep. I mostly bounce from different Walmarts in the area. I live in the South where there's tons to pick from. It's good to pick different parking lots so you don't attract any attention for going to the same one every night. I always made a rule to sleep under the light in the parking lot. One night, the Walmart I picked didn't really have good spots in the light, so I figured I'd just sleep in whichever spot in the back and go to bed after a long day at work. As I woke up to the sun rising, I saw 2 handprints left by a stranger outside my window. This convinced me to always park under the light no matter what, and maybe avoid that specific Walmart. Honestly, I'm just happy whoever it was just looked at me and left me alone. All I had on me was pepper spray, and it wouldn't have worked out if I would have used it while I was in the car.
I am writing this to you, not for your own curiosity, but to satisfy my own, and as a means to remember more of that day, to maybe help soothe the pain I've carried all this time. Journaling, after all, is a good way to deal with trauma. So more than storytelling, I consider this an exorcism of a demon. A demon born 10 years. Right. My nightmare begins in Sarah's laundromat. How stupid. The bell above the door rattled as the glass doors shut behind us. Middle-aged women with pink hair curlers looked up from their wrinkled magazine, rolling their eyes as we ran through the aisles of the laundromat. Henry went for the vending machine. Stephen pulled up stools to the corner arcade cabinets. Aren't you two gonna help? I asked, lifting a basket of reeking clothes up to a washing machine. Neither listened. Henry just walked back, holding in his thin arms a whole cornucopia of Cheetos and Starburst and chocolate. I always wondered where it went. Never got to ask. Stephen kept himself glued to the mirrors, patted down a seat for Henry. I stood and tiptoed over to the machine, piling black smudged sock after black smudged sock, filling the machine to its seeming rim, slamming down the cover and putting it to whatever made the most noise and bustle, and the machine roared, fidgeting in its bolted slot, like all the others, just rows of washing machines grayed with use, metal peeling off their edges as they shook along the wall or against each other. Women wheeled baskets with giant poles, staring at us three with the absolute look of death on their faces, dark ringed eyes and sagging jowls. I went towards the arcade cabinet, stopped. A television in the corner of the room beeped, staticky, in constant rhythm. Emergency report. A missing child, suspect still at large. No details. I looked up, watching the television break to static. The janitor walked out from the back room, sighing, broom still in his hand. He went up to the machine and gave it 2 slaps, back to Cooking with Miranda on Channel 5. The janitor turned, a vulture-looking fellow. One that even after coming here for 6 years, I'd never gotten to learn the name of. He tapped the floor with his broom. "You three again," he sniffed. "Didn't you see the news? Where's your mom's?" "None of your business," I said. "Fuck if I care, then." He waved with that I don't get paid enough attitude, retreating to his nest in the back. All to my sides were the possessed washing machines, shaking along the white tiles, possessed with fury. This was just another Saturday, spending an overcast morning with an arcade machine and yawning old ladies and the buzzing of laundry. I sat down next to Stephen, reaching down into my pocket, past a firework, more on that later, and deep in a pool of quarters. 1 down the hatch, 2, 3. I must have spent an hour sitting there, with Henry eating to my side. I threw my head back, slapping one of the joysticks around. My laundry had been done 20 minutes ago. "You always pick Blanca, holy fuck," I said. "And you always lose, Al," Stephen said. My turn. Henry poked his head between us. My stool wobbled. "You don't even have any quarters," I said. "1 more." "You want to keep losing?" Stephen smiled. He was my age, 13, and of my sensibility. At least I'd like to think. Stephen was the type of guy who always wanted $5 if I had 4, who wanted 2 bags of chips if I had 1, who wanted twice as many games and twice as many friends as me. And to be honest, I was like that too. So naturally, we gravitated towards each other. And naturally, we hated each other too. "Tell him it's my turn, Steve." Henry looked to Stephen, pouting. Just wait one out, Henry. Stephen licked his lips and leaned into the screen. Yeah, one more. I pressed down on the buttons, almost punching them with the side of my fist. Come on, Henry said. Shut up, we both said with our bodies inches away from the screen. The tension of gears and metallic and plastic creaking as the joysticks went every which way, the laundry spinning and groaning with a bin full of clothes, a janitor moving up and down the aisles with lethargy, just to punch the side of an air conditioner rattling and blowing hot air. Old mothers gossiping, dogs barking, muted car honks between the windows along the building. It should have been a normal Saturday. Fuck this, I leaned back. This is boring. Oh, now it's boring. Stephen turned to Henry. We do play the same thing every day, I said. Play the same game, laugh at the same jokes, act the same way. It's not my turn yet, Henry moaned, stuffing his face with a fistful of chips, hands bright orange. I'm tired of this, I said. He says he's tired of this. Stephen laughed to himself. Yeah, and what? And what? I mean, if you're bored, then suggest something, Stephen said. What about my turn? Henry chewed. I looked around and tucked my head and reached into my pockets, fondling for the fuse, finding it, taking it out and presenting it long and flat on the painted plastic of the joystick. Ta-da, I said. Poof. What's that? Henry asked, grabbing his bag of chips, opening them up and finishing the dust settled at the bottom corners. It's a firework, I swallowed. An M80. Aren't those illegal? Stephen asked. So? And although they were, he looked pretty happy about it. Stephen grabbed the firework and spun it in his hands. It's like TNT, I said, a doorman salesman with his pitch. It'll wake up the whole neighborhood. Sick, Stephen said. Where'd you get it from? My uncle brought it back from Mexico. Stephen passed it to Henry, who passed it back to me as quickly as he'd gotten it. Let's pop 'em, I said. I've got 3. I don't think we should, Henry said. If it were up to you, we'd all be in giant bubbles eating cookies until we got fat, I said. Live a little, Henry. Henry didn't want to even stand. He just stood in place, looking at us with shifty eyes and pouty lips, mumbling words and warnings. Stephen grabbed him by one wrist and me by the other. It'll be fun, trust me, I said. We did not go far. We left the clothes back in the laundromat and traveled some 10 minutes out into the street, on Bleecker, near the factories. The skies always looked grayer around that part, and they were particularly empty this day, all save an old man by his porch washing yellow, dried grass with his hose. He was in his underwear, and looked like he was supposed to have died a decade ago. We sat along the sidewalk, my feet in the sewer drains, watching Stephen stalk the sidewalk. Oh shit, he's gonna do it, I said. Stephen put his foot against the chain-link fence and walked up to a gnome by the side of a winding walkway. Stephen huddled over his firework and cursed and shook a lighter in the air. Is he doing it? Henry asked. Stephen went silent. There was hissing in the air. Oh shit, he said in a voice loud enough that attracted big German shepherds in the back of the house. They came running, jumping over a wooden fence. Stephen ran, jumped, got his shirt chewed on, and ripped as he tugged. The dog chewed on his clothes as he fumbled towards us, laughing. And then, like siege fire, a boom. Sparks flying in the air. The whimper of the hound as it ran away, back to its doghouse. Something in the air came flying. I ducked with my hands over my head and closed my eyes. Holy shit, Stephen said. My head came up slowly as I looked to my rear. Smoking in the middle of the street was half the face of a ceramic gnome, burned, scarred black along its once cherub cheeks. I looked to Henry, who stared with wide eyes at the gnome. I turned towards the whimpering dog. I turned towards the older man who had fallen, spraying water all over himself. He flailed in his own water, too slick to stand on his palm. Fucking sick, I said. Henry jumped in the air, screaming something at me. "Did you see that fucker blow up?" Stephen said. One more, Henry said. "All right, but you're lighting it." Oh, Henry winced, tight-lipped. "Never mind then." "Come on, Henry, all of us are doing one." He hesitated, looking at the firework, then breathing heavily. With a sigh, he grabbed one and ran across the street. He stood, looking down the street. A car coming, passing him. "What is he doing?" I asked. "Oh no," Stephen laughed. In front of Henry, a blue mailbox hunched over, bent and with a letter half vomited out of its mouth. Henry walked over to it, crouched and looked about. He opened the gray hatch and looked inside. Nothing. He lit it. He looked at it, surprised that it was in his hand. Then he chunked it straight in. The hatch closed with a screech of its scratching metal. Henry dove into the grass, crawling underneath a small hedge. I swear it flew into the air 5 feet, papers scrambling everywhere. They came over us like feathers, burned at their edges. "What the fuck are you kids doing?" The man with the hose ran up to his fence, lifting his fat leg, or at least trying to. The hose spun sporadically in the floor, twirling with water. "Oh shit," I said. "Come over here, you fucking punks." We ran. The mailbox busted open at the top, smoke coming out of its little hole. It lay crooked on the side of the road as I jumped over it and into the streets further. We didn't even know where we were going. Like kids do, we just kind of laughed and ran in full strides, turning corners wherever it was convenient, laughing and clapping at the moment. Even Henry, scaredy cat that he was. I stopped, holding my knees with my palms as I hunched over and breathed. I looked up to the sign post at the corner. There was no name to the cul-de-sac we landed into. It was just white weathered lettering, an R and an A, but nothing else to give the street definition. I looked around. Most of the windows were broken, some boarded up with wood, graffiti to the side of a yellow, jaundiced-looking house. Henry and Stephen looked around the corner, still giggling. I scratched the back of my neck, and a chill came up my spine. All right, we're done," I said. Both of them turned to me, tightened face as if offended. No, you're still left," Stephen said. "Yeah, that's not fair, pussy," Henry said. "What'd you call me?" I narrowed my eyes and walked up to him. "He's right." Stephen stepped up and grabbed an M80 from my pocket, raising it in the air. "You're left." "I need to get back, pick up my laundry before my mom gets mad," I said. "You're the one who wanted to do this, weren't you?" Stephen asked, turning my head around the space, seeing the curlicues bent and rusted with brown. I could not help but feel a small tremble in my hands. "It doesn't feel safe here," I said. "He doesn't feel safe, Henry." Stephen rolled his eyes. I felt hot, a wave of heat coming out from my chest and up to my cheeks. "Fine then." I snatched the firework from Stephen. "I'll do it here then." I turned a complete circle. Where was here? Only a couple blocks away from the laundromat, but where? Where was this nowhere land? Even now, I still don't remember. I only recall the dead look of the area, a sort of dark, worn grayness in the gravel passing as asphalt, a serpentine design to the cracked roads. Shingles fell to the house next to me. Paint chips followed, in big clumps that popped against the floor like hail. A broken rocking horse lay in overgrown grass. It glared at me with brown eyes. This was a street so silent and warped and ruined that it looked as if in moments of collapse. It was like the nightmare land of a dreamer, and the dreamer was waking up. "Is anyone here?" I looked over my shoulders. Were those passing eyes in the glass? "Who cares who's here?" Stephen raised his hands. "You sure?" I asked. My teeth clattered. I looked left and right. Henry was starting to feel it too, hiding behind Stephen as he did. "Hurry up, I want to leave." Henry said. Not you, too. Stephen pulled his arm away from Henry. I leaned down to place the firework, somewhere on the sidewalk. No, Stephen said. I put mine in someone's house. Henry put his in a mailbox. You gotta do something cool, too. All right, what do you want me to do, then? Stephen scratched his chin, a look of absolute concentration. Lips tightened, hand on his chin where he picked at the few strands of beard growing. Henry walked up behind him, arms folded as if cold, but it was a warm day. How about under that van? He pointed down, towards the center of the cul-de-sac. A lone white van without a license plate, without design, with blinders on its black-tinted windows. Neat looking, too clean for the street. I turned the M80 in my hand and then looked back at the two. I'll blow it up, I said. That's the point, right? Stephen laughed. I'm not doing that. Pussy. I'm not doing that. Loser. No, I said. I'm not. I'm not. Then why the fuck did you even bring those fireworks? Stephen tilted his head. I went tight-lipped, sucking in my cheeks. Truth struck me hard. It felt like a piece of glass edged its way into my chest cavity. Something that drained the pride out of me. I looked down at the M80. Fine. Okay. I walked up to the van, up to its black-tinted windows, curious. I couldn't see a thing, so I knelt down towards the wheels where I eyed the perfect spot to put the firework, right behind the front tire. I pulled grime off the sidewalk with my feet, a combination of a Lucky Star burger plastic wrapper and dirt and decayed leaves that caked and broke at my touch. Brown goop seeped out of the clusters. It made me gag. I flung the stuff to the side and planted the M80 tall behind the wheel amongst cigarette butts. Got my lighter, flicked the flint, observed the flame as it licked the air, and the van suspension dropped. I looked up to the window, a shifting shadow. There's someone in here. I mouthed the words. No noise came out. A door opened, my heart raced. I looked back and forth and back and forth. Sweat beads rolled down my face and my chest hurt. Just do it, pussy, Stephen screamed. I heard the person behind the van groan and mumble. I lit the firework and turned to run. Then I squeaked, curled, and turned. A black spotted arm grabbed my wrist. Something crooked and long and bony. Something beyond the burning fuse. What's wrong? Stephen asked, coming forward. I pulled, and the arm pulled back. I kicked, and it dragged me closer, pulling my cheek into the textured wheel. Let go, I said. Oh shit. Stephen started to turn to run. Henry was already crying. The fuse kept going, moments away from the explosion. So I reached forward to his black-spotted finger and bit hard enough to feel the grit of bone hurt my front teeth. The man made no noise. Nothing save a small chuckle. The hand let go. I sprawled and tripped and kicked away, back to the sidewalk. The M80 went off. With such a concussion that my ears went deaf, and though I opened my mouth and I was not sure I was screaming, no voice was discernible. It was one note of static beep. I ran, hearing coming back to me as if lifting my head through a water surface. I stopped at the corner and turned, mouth agape in awe. The van lit up and its alarm system blasted in bright, beeping anger. Yellow monster eyes flashing. And in front, hunched over, though still very tall, I saw him. A white-garbed man, perhaps painter or carpenter or priest or asylum runaway. Crooked-looking, taking off his cap to observe his car. He turned, a giant black blotch across his chin and neck, the spot the devil must have touched him. The Dalmatian man. He looked at me and me at him, and he smiled and waved, which at the time I believed to be a goodbye, and that now I wish it was. I spread the pleated window curtains with my fingers and peeked outside to the front of the house. "You're still worried about him?" Stephen asked. "You didn't see him?" Eyes scanning across the empty streets. "You wouldn't be scared unless you saw him." "What about you, Henry? What do you think?" "I don't know. I got scared when Al got scared." Henry wasn't even looking. He carried his head with one hand and flipped through manga pages with his other. A copy of Berserker in black leather that from the window looked like a demonic tome. A Necronomicon. A satanic Bible. I went over and took it and put it back on my library, tossed somewhere in the mess of papers and figures. It was a messy room, the floor covered with blankets and an air mattress and pillows. The oak tables were pushed in, closer to the center and stacked with VCR tapes, my Super Nintendo, tube televisions. It looked like a NASA station, just a mess of techno-gizmos and papers and triad workers glowing with the screen glare of television monitors. "I was reading that." Henry's face dropped. "This is serious," I said. "You should have seen him." "Was he mad?" Stephen asked. "No." "Does he know who you are?" "How could he?" "Then what's the problem?" Stephen said. "I don't know, but I just know there's a problem." "Who cares?" Stephen leaned back on my bed. He looked over to the television where some rerun played and where static cut the screen straight in half. It was my taping of Cowboy Bebop. A crackle of black and white discoloration on the bottom half came up. Stephen made a sound like a leech suckle and leaned over and slapped it on its side. It was fixed, but the sound went off. A fan blew quietly overhead. My curtains rattled with the gust. "If you didn't want to get scared, you shouldn't have bombed his van, dude," Stephen said. "You guys made me." "How'd we make you do that?" Stephen asked. "You're the one who brought out fireworks in the first place." "Yeah, Al," Henry said. "Shut up, Henry." "You shut up. Don't get mad at him just because you're scared." Stephen cut between us, torso leaning down from the top of the bed. "I'm not scared." "Then why'd you ask us to sleep over?" My mom isn't home. I thought we could just chill out." "Chill out," he says. Stephen turned to Henry. "He just didn't want to be alone." "If you don't want to be here, you can just leave." "Well, all right by me." Stephen opened the door. He went halfway out into the dark hall. I fidgeted in place, watching as Henry stood and wiped his sniffle and started out to follow Stephen. I bit my lips. Outside, a branch hit against the stucco walls. Cats hissed, two of them fighting in the alley below. My wooden table creaked, a notch or nail popping under its aged legs. The television sounded warped, the anime almost demonic in its creepy sound. Okay. I ran past them in the hall, putting my hands across to block the hall. A picture of my mother slanted off its nail. She'd fix it after graveyard shift. "What?" Stephen smiled. "I'm scared." My legs shook. Come on, just this night." "All right, but we want pizza. Don't we, Henry?" Yeah, pizza." Henry's eyes grew. "With pineapple." "Gross," Stephen said. I closed my eyes and sighed. I looked into my pocket for money I knew didn't exist. And I knew I'd have to steal some from the emergency fund. And I knew I would get yelled at. And I knew I would do it anyway. Anything to not be alone. Anything to just distract myself from the idle sounds of the apartment. The first few hours of the night, up until midnight, were the easiest. Hearing the noises of animated people around me distracted my attention. Because if I wasn't distracted, I'd go up to the sofa and peel the curtains and look outside. I just wanted people and noises. Hearing my neighbors scream and bang the walls so hard the picture frames fell. Hearing the honks of cars on the main streets below me. Hearing those two idiot friends laughing. All of it was comforting in its annoying way. Around 10 at night, there was a knock on the door. I stood on my chair, feeling the top of a kitchen cabinet for the secret stash, a little aluminum cookie box where my mother kept her money. Another knock, harsher. "What's that?" I screamed out. "Pizza guy." Stephen walked into the kitchen, leaning against the wall. "You go get it." "Really, dude? Really?" I held a 20 out. My hand quivered. He rolled his eyes and plucked the bill and went out of the kitchen, into the living room and into the small foyer. The door opened and slammed. I looked outside through the window, eyes wandering to the parking lot. A white van. My body went cold. Was that the same van? The same person? Henry? Stephen? I kept my hand on the curtains, keeping them peeled, keeping the van within the view of the small opening. "Stephen," I said. No word. The lights went out. "Stephen?" My eyes blinked to the sudden darkness. I looked back and forth between the window and the entrance to the kitchen. I let go of the curtains, wandering, touched the walls with my fingertips, took apprehensive steps. I hit my toaster and knocked it over. Fuck. I went stiff, breathing heavily and loud. My heart hammered in my chest, my fingers growing numb and pulsing. "Henry? Hello? Hello?" I turned the corner, reaching my hand for the spot I remember the light switch to be on. The cold touch of plastic and something else. Flesh. A grip that closed on my index finger. Fuck! I fell, scrambled, dragging myself back until I hit the table and then hugged the legs. The lights turned on. Stephen stood there, pizza in one hand and the light switch with his other, grin on his face, smug and wide. "You fucking asshole!" I slapped the tile floor with my palm. "You fucking asshole!" "Did I get you?" Stephen asked. Henry walked in, cookie in his mouth. He chewed loud. "Why is he on the floor?" Henry asked. "You're not right in the head. You know that. I could have been killed." "Who would have killed you? And for what?" He laid the pizza flat, sat with folded legs, and ate. Mondo's Pizza Parlor printed in red against the white box. My favorite pizza. That to me tasted absolutely dull and lifeless. I pulled out a chair and sat, taking small nibbles. The strings of cheese dangled out of Henry's mouth. Stephen sat with folded legs, eating the cups of pepperoni first. The grease left his mouth yellow. "Chill, eat," Stephen said. My eyes looked up, glaring at him. He gave me a wary look, then turned towards the television on the kitchen countertop. All I could take were nibbles. Every now and then I'd drift off into the window and look outside to the parking lots and alleys, half expecting the van to be there still, but it was gone. And what did I prefer? That I'd have it there, visible and held to my observation? Or that it would be out somewhere, unknown? It wasn't like I was sure it was the same van. A fair distance below and away, it could have been any other van. I'd only seen it from the top. But there was a strangeness to the way it'd make me feel. The way that just one look at its sterile, bleached white surface made my neck hairs rise. The way how, when I sat on a sofa to watch television, the air felt cold and uncomfortable. The way all the laughter and the conversation slipped past me. Henry snapped his fingers in front of my face. "It's late," he said. "Let's go." I swallowed, though my mouth was dry. We went to sleep, both of them on an air mattress in my room and me on the single bed with a black and red squared blanket, eyes wide open and staring up to a ceiling fan, blowing warm air down at me. I felt thirsty around midnight and stepped gently on the floor, tiptoeing and arching my legs over my friends. I closed the door, still hearing Henry snoring through the wood. I went down the hall towards the living room, hand out to feel for the furniture in the blind darkness. There was no moon and the streetlights were far enough that Their yellow glow did not reach. I came to the living room, looking out to the foyer where a single light shone. They must have left it on for the delivery man. I pulled down on the cord. My arm hairs rose. A cool draft came over me in the darkness. There was a small gap in the door. The air breezed through. I closed it and locked it, and stared through the eye peep. Nothing, right? A small mistake. I walked to the kitchen and took a glass and started filling it, finishing it in one giant gulp before going in for another. Back to the living room, I stood still, my head tilted to the side. Were the cabinets moved slightly? The table just angled a little differently than how we'd left them? Footsteps in the hall. I turned sharply, eyes wide, though I couldn't have seen much. Who's there? I asked. It's me, dude, Henry said. Forgot my retainers. He wandered and went back to his room, and the door closed. I needed to lock down this whole house. I went behind the television where I always hide my keys and gripped them hard. First locking my mother's room, then locking the office, and finally the bathroom. I clenched the keys close to my chest and walked back into my room, around my two friends, who still snored, and laying down flat on my bed. I spent 2 hours awake, every so often looking out the window towards the outside. The clock read 2:15 a.m. I turned it over and lay it on my side until my arm went numb, still holding the keys in my grip. Stephen rose. I knew it was him. Henry was still snoring after all. He walked out, yawned, loud, socked footsteps going down the hall and around the corner. A doorknob turned. What the fuck? He said. The voice echoed. It's locked, man. Right. Shit, you need the key. I fumbled out of bed and started walking down, stepping over Henry, who grumbled. You need the key. I'm sorry. With a fast pace, almost sliding across the floorboard. What's wrong with you, man? Stephen asked, still turning the knob like it had unlocked itself with enough stubbornness. I went through the key ring, flipped through each one and finding the small one, taking it out from the others. He snorted and looked at me with puffed eyes. If you didn't want this, you should have never played that stupid game. You know that, he said. I know. I handed him the key. Everyone will laugh at you at school if they saw you like this. Stephen said, You're afraid of a painter. A painter? I don't care. I know he's here. I saw his van outside earlier. You what? He shook his head and unlocked the door. I saw his van outside. I swear, I said. Behind the door, the toilet bowl splattered and a coke-fueled torrent of piss roared. There's like 100 white vans in this city, and you know for a fact you saw his, he asked. The piss spittered off into a few drops. I put my head against the wall. It hurt. My eyes hurt. My chest hurt. Yeah. I tapped against the wall with my skull. Yeah, I know. It sounds fucked, but it's true. Stephen walked out, face drooped and bitter looking. It doesn't sound fucked, Stephen said. It sounds like you're insane. I looked up, hostile eyes staring at him and narrowing. Just give me the key. I held my palm out. Am I a prisoner or something? Give me the key, I said. He clenched his jaw and tucked it into his lip, making a puckering sound like a small pop. All right, that's it. I'm calling my mom to pick me up. Fine, I said. Just give me the key. Here's your fucking key, man. He dropped it on the floor and went for the living room. I went to my room, onto my bed, feeling the heat rise up in my cheeks. Your fucking phone doesn't work, dude. I heard Stephen scream in the living room. Keep trying then. I went over to the bed and pawed the mattress, feeling for the keys to the blanket or the sound of the rattle. Odd. Nothing. The keys weren't there. "It's cut, dude. I don't hear anything but a beep." Stephen screamed again. I heard him slam the receiver down, then lift it just to slam it down again. I kept palming, kept looking. Stephen walked down the hall holding the phone. "The cord is cut, dude. Look." He stopped in the doorframe. I turned back briefly to him. Stephen went statue-like. "What?" I looked back to the mattress, turning over the blankets and the mattress. The air carried a cold touch. Henry rustled in his sheets. The curtains fluttered, but the windows were closed. Stephen mumbled words, inanities. I turned back to him, still red in the face. "The fuck's your problem?" I asked. "Did you break my phone or something, man?" He wasn't even looking at me. His eyes were just wide and looking past me into the corner of the room. "What?" I asked. He lifted his finger, and I turned around. He was hard to discern in the dark. It was like staring at a textured shadow, something warping darkness itself. I could not notice it at first, yet could not look away. And as my eyes widened, as I stepped back, tripping over the mattress, I saw it blink. One eye blinked, the other delayed. "Hi," the Dalmatian man said. I ran out. Henry rose from his bed slightly, rubbing his eyes. Stephen went down the hall. Both of us closed the bathroom door and locked it. We retreated to the corner. The bathroom key shook in my grip. The phone shook in Stephen's. "Can he get in?" Stephen asked. "No." I raised the key to him. "I don't." The doorknob turned and we screamed. It turned and turned. A slam at the wood. It felt like the whole house quaked. We screamed, passed beyond the point where the turning stopped. We stopped, and at that brief moment heard Henry. A stifled scream, ended short somehow or some way. "We gotta get out of here, man." Stephen reached for the door. I held him back. No. He's out there with him." He kept going for the doorknob, and I pushed him away. Into the toilet, wrestling against the sink, into the tub. The water faucet ran. Footsteps went back and forth in the hall, and we both screamed. "We can't go out there," I said. "We can't. He'll get us too." "Do you even hear yourself?" Stephen asked. "Henry's out there. He's gone." Stephen looked at me in the door. His face tightened, jumping at each turn of the knob. The phone lay on its side next to the running faucet. "He's gone." I sat down in the toilet seat. "He's gone. He's gone." For a while, we bashed our fists against the wall. We screamed. We hoped someone would hear. No one ever did. Even with all the windows open, the futility of it, after the first few hours, was enough to have us stop for the rest of the night. We sat in that seat until my mother came home. She opened the door on both of us, eyes red and cheeks swollen. It was harder talking to the police later that day. My throat hurt from the strain, and each word was interrupted with a cough or a wheeze. But the words came out eventually. The first couple of officers multiplied within 10 minutes, and within the hour after dawn break, there was a small search executed for Henry J. Matthews. They never found him, and I could never look his mother in the eye and tell her what had happened. I think that was the first day I became truly alone. I don't remember having friends after that day. No one spoke to me, and I spoke to no one. A few months later, I left for Boston. My mother thought the transfer would be good for me, sent me with my father. Nothing changed. Nothing ever did. Nothing ever changes. I remember and think, maybe in the details, that I'll find a clue. I've spent 4 years learning criminal science, studying psychology myself, in the hopes that I'll figure something out. Something, perhaps, about the character of the Dalmatian man, or about myself. But any freedom from my guilt has already tanked and capsized. It's so deep in the ocean that is me that I don't think I'll ever have it. I probably never could. Solace, salvation, it's there at the bottom, idling and rusting. But at least I know it's there. I wish I could say I knew where Henry was.
I was born and brought up in Delhi, but my family originally belongs to Bihar. All these experiences started when I first went to visit my grandparents, and because I was 2 or 3 years old, I don't remember the incident at all, but my parents and other villagers have told me about it many times. My grandparents' home was a 2-story building without railing, and I was playing on the roof besides my sister and my cousin, who were reading something. It was around 6 in the evening, and the sun hadn't set fully yet. My mother went downstairs to get something, leaving me with my elder sister, who was about 14 years older than me. Somehow I fell off the roof. When my mother came back, she didn't find me, and within 2 or 3 minutes the whole village was looking for me. After a few hours, someone found me under a tree that had a lot of thorns. They found me without any clothes, or without a single scratch on my body, laying there blindly as someone had just placed me there. I also want to mention that it wouldn't be possible for anyone to take me away without being noticed by someone, since the stairs are right in the middle of the house and there were about 20 family members present in the house. After this, I was taken to a priest who said that someone or something is linked with me. When I visited my grandparents at the age of 13, I used to roam around the fields. While going home one late evening, I saw a beautiful girl, must have been about the same age, appearing out of nowhere. We talked for a bit and became friends. At the start, she would often meet me around a particular place, but after a few meetings, there was no fixed time or place, and she would appear out of thin air, especially when I was in a bad mood. I also want to mention that these meetings took place over a long period of time, as I used to visit my grandparents every year, but would only stay there about a week or so. As time passed, I kind of became addicted to her. I knew there was something odd about her, because whenever I used to ask her about her parents, or where she lives, or any personal questions, she would totally avoid the questions. Also, she used to wear the same white dress every time. When I asked her about it, she smiled and answered, saying that I used to like the dress very much, but I know very well that I never complimented her on her dress. When my grandfather died, we stopped to visit in the village, as my grandmother came to live with us. I didn't see her for a month, since I didn't have my usual trip to my grandparents, but I saw her here, in Delhi. At first I was very happy, and also shocked to see her. I must have been 18 at the time. When I came back home, I talked about her with my mom. My grandmother overheard us and was furious at first, because it wasn't allowed in the village for a boy and a girl to spend time alone in the late evenings. When I described how she looks, my grandma said that no one looks like that in the village. The village isn't a big one, and my grandmother spent over 60 years in that village, and she was very confident that the girl that I'm describing must have been from another village, but the nearest village to my village is about 5 kilometers, and it wouldn't have been possible or allowed for a girl to transfer that much distance all by herself in late evening. My grandmother and my mother were slightly worried, but they didn't say anything else, but they told me to invite the girl to the house the next day. The next day, when I met her, I asked her to come to my house. She answered in a very strange way, her voice still fresh in my head. She said with a smile, "Do you really want me to come with you to your house?" I was a bit startled by how she said it, and I muttered, "Not right now, but tomorrow." She agreed and left. I returned home and told my mother about it. The next day, I asked my mother to make something nice for my friend, and she smiled. I waited for her to come, but the time passed, and yet there's no sign of her. My mom said that she was going to pick up some clothes from the roof, and will come back quickly. Seconds later, she left, and the girl arrived. I asked her to come in and shouted for my mom and grandmother, who were upstairs. I asked her to wait as I ran towards the kitchen for cookies that my mom had made for us. After some time, she said that it was getting late and she had to leave. but I asked her to wait so that she could meet with my family. After about 10 minutes or so, she said it would soon be dark, and hence she would have to be going, and that she'll have to meet my mom some other time, and then left. I was furious with my mother, as she said that she would be back soon, and my friend waited over a half an hour just to meet her. As I was going to make my way towards the stairs, I saw her coming down. I yelled at her, asking her where she was and why she didn't come down when I called her. Looking confused, she said she didn't hear anything, and why did the girl leave so early? When I told her that we were waiting for her for half an hour, she surprisingly answered and said she was only gone for 5 to 10 minutes, at most. I thought she was making excuses and ran to my room. This was the first time my mother started to believe that something was wrong. After this, every time the girl used to meet me, other people would never be present due to various reasons. My mother was worried and decided to place a camera in my room, where most of the meetings used to take place. But surprisingly, the camera didn't catch anything. My parents thought that I might have some psychological problems and consulted with a psychiatrist. Various tests were done, but the results came back normal. My grandmother, who was a very spiritual woman, asked my parents to take me back to the same priest who examined me in my childhood. This priest performed rituals and gave me a sort of a pendant-like thing and asked me never to remove it from my neck. As soon as I came back to Delhi, I felt sick. I was admitted to the hospital, but none of the doctors could determine the reason for my high fever. For 3 months, I was suffering from an unknown disease until one day my nephew, who was around 6 years at the time, came to visit me along with my parents. My brother-in-law said that the nephew was asking to see me, hence why he had to bring him. My brother-in-law and my mother went outside for some time. Meanwhile, my nephew came near me and snatched away the pendant and threw it out the window. I didn't understand why he did this, but before I could react, I saw her standing right behind him after 3 months, still in that white dress, and I passed out. After some time, I woke up and found the doctors examining me. As the doctor left, my mother, nephew, and brother-in-law came into the room. My nephew was crying. He must have been scolded by his father for what he did. They were asking him why he threw the pendant away. Surprisingly, he said that an older girl than himself asked him to do it. We were all shocked, but surprisingly I wasn't sick anymore, and I was feeling normal within a week. I was discharged from the hospital. This incident freaked me out to an extent, but still whenever she used to meet me, I couldn't resist her. These meetings increased significantly when I went to Kota for studies with my cousin. Also, after my return from the hospital, my family members too started to see her and feel her. Mainly my mother, often feeling that someone had just entered into my room, but finding no one. Also, bad things started to happen to people that were mean to me, as a boy made fun of me for my glasses and said someone pushed him down the stairs the same day. Time passed, and one day my father called me, saying that he was coming to meet me and that he also got a new pendant from the priest for me. That night, she said she wouldn't leave me this time and no one could interfere. The next day I came back from classes. I had many missed calls from my mother. When I called her, I was shocked that my father had an accident while coming back from the railway station. Suddenly I remembered what she had said the previous night, and I gasped in sheer fear. That night, when she came to meet me, I was frightened a bit, but I told her that I didn't want to meet her anymore, and that she should leave. I can't remember anything after that. After that night, I never saw her again, and to this day, I've only seen her in a dream. The same dream every time, where we are sitting on a bench in front of a huge tree. She is wearing the same dress, and that's all I can remember from the dream. This happens every full moon, and whenever I'm feeling very sad, but I never saw her in person again. Also, I would like to mention that I've been in 2 major accidents, but escaped both times without injury.